The day Malibu Shores Beach Club met Chris Hemsworth began with a gentle, overcast sky that muted the vibrant coastal palette of Southern California. A late morning breeze drifted across the golden sands, carrying the briny scent of the Pacific Ocean to the bustling outdoor lounge where beach umbrellas stood like colorful sentinels. Although the infamous Southern California sun had chosen to hide behind thick clouds, the club was still lively. Locals and tourists alike gathered to sip iced teas and tropical mocktails, perching on cushioned deck chairs overlooking the rolling surf. On most mornings, Malibu Shores Beach Club sparkled with a bright affluence. A place where the well-to-do mingled casually and staff prided themselves on delivering first-class service. There were always a few celebrities meandering through, adding to the club's mystique, though they often announced their presence with an entourage or a high-end sports car. But this morning, Chris Hemsworth arrived in a much quieter fashion. Clad in a plain white t-shirt, faded board shorts, and a well-worn baseball cap pulled low over his brow, he looked more like a laid-back surfer than an international film star. He navigated the polished deck slowly, pausing to admire the ocean's subtle grandeur. At first, hardly anyone registered his presence. A few heads turned vaguely, but the patrons were accustomed to glimpses of famous faces. Even if they recognized him, most guests at Malibu Shores Beach Club were discreet. Yet, the staff's reaction that day was anything but warm. The minute Chris, dressed so unassumingly, settled on a lounge chair near the water, an undercurrent of dismissal swept through the team. Perhaps it was because he hadn't sauntered in with the airs of a VIP, or maybe a staff member simply misread his casual attire as a sign he didn't belong. Among the onlookers was Sasha Rivera, a local blogger who loved capturing slice-of-life videos wherever she went. She'd come to Malibu Shores that morning to film the waves and do a quick review of the club's brunch menu. Her camera was discreet, designed to record in high definition without drawing attention. As it so happened, it also ended up capturing much more than scenic vistas. The lens caught the moment Chris Hemsworth scanned the food offerings at the beachside bar, a gentle smile playing at his lips as he prepared to approach the staff for a menu. Unbeknownst to him, that small act would trigger a chain reaction in the ranks of the club employees. Some shot him suspicious glances, others outright ignored him. A few guests who recognized him tilted their heads in confusion, wondering why he was being treated like an outsider. Still, no major conflict erupted in that moment. Chris Hemsworth merely shrugged off the initial brush off. He was here for a peaceful morning by the water, a break from Hollywood chaos. If the staff seemed a bit aloof, well, he guessed they might be having a busy day or dealing with some internal glitch. He was hardly the type to cause a scene. But as the overcast skies hinted, the calm would not last. Beneath the professional facade of Malibu Shores Beach Club lay a tension soon to emerge. And hidden amid the natural hush of rolling waves and the mellow hum of conversation, Sasha's camera kept rolling. That unassuming device would soon reveal an untold story of prejudice, humility, and the unbreakable core of human dignity that even the glitz and glamour of a famed establishment could not overshadow. As the day edged into late morning, Chris Hemsworth gazed out at the steel, gray horizon where sky met sea. The typical brilliance of Malibu's coastline was subdued by the layers of cloud, giving everything a dreamlike quality. His presence at Malibu Shores Beach Club was supposed to be a low-key affair, a chance to unwind, catch a few waves, and enjoy a quiet meal. But beneath the surface, friction was stirring. The first spark of tension arrived in the form of Oliver Hastings, the club's manager. Oliver Hastings was a figure of authority and pride, standing in his mid-40s with a statuesque posture and a starched navy blazer that seemed almost too formal for a beachfront location. Known for his meticulous eye for detail and an unapologetic focus on status, Oliver had built a reputation as a gatekeeper of exclusivity. If you didn't fit his mold of a desirable patron, you'd feel it in the air before anyone uttered a word. from the moment he spotted Chris Hemsworth leaning casually against the bar. Oliver's eyes narrowed. Chris didn't have a reservation, an entourage, or the tickle trappings of wealth that Oliver was used to seeing. In Oliver's mind, this was a red flag. He signaled to a nearby staff member, Molly Carter, a soft-spoken waitress new to Malibu shores. Molly watched with cautious eyes as Oliver's lips tightened in disapproval. In her heart, Molly sensed something was off. She recognized Chris Hemsworth, even if Oliver didn't, and she couldn't understand why the manager seemed so bothered. But as a recent hire, she feared making waves. So she only followed orders, even when they felt misguided. Oliver asked her to check Chris's membership status, but Molly hesitated. "Is that really necessary?" she asked, voice trembling. Oliver's response was curt. "You want to keep your job? Here, you'll do as asked, Ms. Carter. Malibu Shores doesn't cater to walk-ins without proper clearance. We have standards." Meanwhile, Chris approached the bar in search of a quick bite and a cold drink. He offered Molly a friendly grin as she approached. "Good morning," he said. "Could I grab a menu? Anything you recommend for brunch?" Molly glanced over her shoulder. Oliver watched them like a hawk from the corner of the deck. She swallowed, forcing a polite smile. "Of course, sir. But may I see your membership card, please?" Chris's smile flickered. "Membership card." He laughed softly. "I didn't realize I needed one. Usually I just walk up, pay, and enjoy the day. I'm not aware of a strictly members-only policy here. At least not from what I've read." His easygoing response seemed to baffle Molly, who had expected an argument. Carefully, she handed him a menu but kept darting nervous glances toward Oliver. "I apologize," she stammered. "It's just the club rules. Let me see what I can do for you." Over by a nearby cabana, Sasha Rivera was adjusting her camera settings. She couldn't help noticing the awkward exchange. Something in Oliver Hastings's demeanor sent a chill through the air, an unspoken sign that Chris Hemsworth's presence, unannounced and unornamented by any Hollywood fanfare, did not pass muster. Sasha felt a pang of concern. She'd come here looking for scenic footage. She hadn't anticipated capturing real tension unfolding. Yet her instincts told her this was important to document. She subtly positioned her camera to keep Chris and the staff in the frame. As Chris waited for any sign of normal service, eyes turned in his direction. A hush seemed to spread from staff to patrons, as though everyone sensed something was amiss. A few guests who recognized Chris whispered among themselves. Why were they treating him like this? After all, he'd been in blockbuster films that even Oliver Hastings himself had likely enjoyed on some streaming platform, though Oliver seemed oblivious or simply unconvinced. Hunger and confusion gnawed at Chris, but he kept his cool. He chose to believe it was a misunderstanding. In the back of his mind, though, the question lingered. What if this was deliberate? He recalled hearing stories about seemingly luxurious spots that harbored subtle prejudices, sometimes based on economic assumptions, sometimes on snap judgments of appearance. He had never expected to witness it so openly in a place as iconic as Malibu Shores. He thanked Molly for the menu and promised to wait patiently. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, it became increasingly clear that the tension wasn't going away. Instead, it hovered, waiting for a spark to set everything aflame. When Chris Hemsworth noticed, nearly 20 minutes had passed without anyone returning to take his order. He decided to walk up to the bar himself. The lounge area was growing busier by the minute. Yet no one, aside from Molly Carter, seemed willing to serve him. Perhaps it was merely a hectic day, but the longer he waited, the more stares he received from staff. He found Oliver Hastings standing by a row of fresh coconuts on display, inspecting them with the utmost seriousness. The manager was speaking quietly with a bartender, occasionally casting glances in Chris's direction. A cluster of guests milled about, some waiting for their drinks, others ogling the spectacle forming. Chris kept his voice calm as he spoke. "Excuse me, Mr. Hastings, right?" He extended a hand. "I'm Chris. I wondered if there was a problem with my order. I've been waiting a while, and I'd love to get something to eat." Oliver didn't bother returning the handshake. Instead, he kept his arms folded, as though warding off an unwelcome intruder. "We have protocols, sir," he replied icily. "In case you weren't aware, Malibu Shores Beach Club enforces a member and guest list policy." Chris nodded. "I see, I've been here before. Admittedly, it's been some time. I wasn't aware the policy changed. If you need me to pay a guest fee, that's perfectly fine." Oliver regarded him with open suspicion, glancing up and down as if assessing every thread of Chris's casual outfit. "I'm not sure a guest fee will suffice," he said, stressing the words with a sneer. "Malibu Shores is quite exclusive. Typically, you need a member sponsor or a recognized VIP status with the club." It finally dawned on Chris that Oliver's hostility might be more than just a misunderstanding. Was it because Oliver genuinely didn't recognize him, or was this about something else? Chris's shoulders tightened at the implied dismissal. Still, he tried to keep the peace. "Well, if it's an issue of recognition, maybe we can get on the phone with an owner or—" Before he could finish, Oliver held up a palm. "No, that won't be necessary," he said. "I'm sorry, but we'll have to ask you to vacate the premise if you can't produce the appropriate credentials." Around them, patrons watched with growing dismay. A few recognized Chris Hemsworth plainly, their eyes wide with shock at Oliver's disrespect. Others simply sensed a power play unfolding, a manager overstepping his bounds. Molly Carter hovered anxiously, wringing her hands, unsure how to intervene. By now, Sasha Rivera had moved closer with her camera, positioning herself behind a potted palm. She recorded the entire exchange, her heart pounding. She had intended to post a lighthearted vlog about Malibu's best brunch spots. Instead, she was capturing a blatant display of discrimination that made her stomach churn. Then came a telling moment. Another patron, Jason Brooks, a local business consultant, stepped in. "Excuse me, Mr. Hastings," said Jason, clearing his throat. "I know this gentleman." He gestured to Chris with a polite nod. "He's a celebrated actor. Chris Hemsworth. You might have seen him in the Thor movies." Oliver's mouth tightened. He shot Jason a look that screamed, "Stay out of this," but Jason persisted. "Chris has as much right to be here as anyone else. If a membership fee is an issue, I'd be more than happy to cover it. Let's not make a scene." For a moment, a hush descended. Chris appreciated Jason's attempt at diplomacy, but Oliver seemed unimpressed. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Brooks," Oliver said sharply. "But the club's policies are set in stone. Recognition or not, we have standards. And if Mr. Hemsworth cannot confirm his membership, he doesn't belong here." It was the first time Oliver addressed Chris Hemsworth by name. Yet the tone dripped with skepticism, as though Chris's identity was up for debate. Chris's eyes hardened. This was no simple confusion. It felt personal, an arrogance that refused to bend even in the face of reason. A wave of frustration surged in Chris's chest. He'd always tried to maintain a humble public persona, but he was no stranger to confrontation when the situation demanded it. He turned to Oliver, voice steady yet simmering with anger. "All right, we're at an impasse. You believe I don't belong because I'm not displaying some outward sign of my success. Is that it?" Oliver raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps you misunderstand me, Mr. Hemsworth. Malibu Shores Beach Club caters to a certain clientele. We must preserve our brand and ambience. You arrived without notice. No membership proof, no sponsor. You're not in our system." The hypocrisy stung. Chris had been to private clubs many times without formal introduction, especially in a laid-back city like Malibu. He had never met such resistance, particularly not after people realized who he was. But here was Oliver Hastings, refusing to see reason or accept real-time solutions like calling an owner or verifying credentials online. By now, the tension had escalated into a full-on standoff. Chris clenched his jaw, an internal voice urging him to keep calm. "I'm not here to disrupt your brand, Oliver," he said. "I just wanted a quiet morning, a decent meal, and maybe to catch some waves. If you don't want to accommodate me because of some personal bias, that's your choice. But understand, it's not going unnoticed." Oliver's lips curled into a patronizing smirk. "I assure you, Mr. Hemsworth, there's no personal bias here. It's simply protocol. Please vacate the club." Chris's heart thudded in his ears. A swirl of hurt, indignation, and faint disbelief coalesced inside him. The place he had once frequented, though not regularly, was now treating him as a trespasser. A glance around revealed a mix of reactions, some sympathetic, some curious, and a few smug faces that seemed to relish the drama. In that moment, the confrontation stood on the edge of a knife. Chris could either push back or step away. The moral lines were as cloudy as the sky overhead. He thought of the staff's silent stares, the onlooking guests, and especially of Molly Carter, who looked on with watery eyes. Torn between fear of losing her job and the desire to do what was right, Chris inhaled slowly, mustering every ounce of composure. The last thing he wanted was a public blowout that might overshadow the real issue at hand. Discrimination masked as club rules. So he held Oliver Hastings's gaze. "I'm not leaving just yet," he said firmly. "But I also won't force my way in if this entire place is as narrow-minded as you're making it seem." At that, Oliver's face twitched with anger. He signaled to a pair of uniformed security guards who were lingering by the side gates. "Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Hemsworth outside. This conversation is over." All eyes turned to the security team, their broad shoulders and stoic expressions indicating they were prepared to follow orders. The crowd pressed closer, some with phones raised, capturing every second of the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner, Sasha's camera recorded the moment for posterity. An account of prejudice and injustice that would soon reveal more than anyone, including Chris Hemsworth, could have anticipated. It all seemed to happen in slow motion. The two security guards, Marcus Wilcox and Robert Green, stepped forward. Their postures were tense, as though they dreaded the task thrust upon them. It was one thing to eject a rowdy troublemaker. It was another to remove a celebrity of Chris Hemsworth's stature who was causing no physical disturbance at all. Yet, they had their orders from Oliver Hastings. A hush swallowed the lounge as the pair approached. Chris Hemsworth stood his ground near the bar, a swirl of emotions flickering in his eyes. He realized that if he physically resisted, the incident would explode into a spectacle of tabloids and sensational headlines. No, he needed to handle this with more dignity. But the final straw was Oliver's sneering command. "Mr. Hemsworth, you are not welcome here," he declared for all to hear, voice loud enough to echo over the churning waves. "We do not cater to individuals who can't follow basic membership protocol." "Now out!" A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Jason Brooks, still trying to defend Chris, blurted out, "This is ridiculous." "I've offered to sponsor him. He's a world-famous actor. Why are you humiliating him like this?" A few others nodded in agreement, but Oliver's stony facade did not crack. Molly Carter, who had been standing by the bar, could no longer contain her dismay. "Sir," she addressed Oliver, summoning more courage than she thought she possessed. "This is not right. He's not done anything wrong. We've had members bring guests before and—" Oliver spun on her, eyes aflame. "And you'll keep your mouth shut if you know what's good for you, Ms. Carter," he snapped. "Unless you'd like to join our uninvited guest on the other side of the gates." Molly's cheeks flushed, tears threatening to spill. She glanced at Chris apologetically, but Chris gave her the tiniest nod, as if to say don't risk your job. Then he turned back to the guards, exhaling slowly, a half-formed smile on his lips that held neither mirth nor anger, only a calm acceptance. "All right," he said softly. If I'm truly not welcome, I'll go. But this is going to follow you, Oliver. You can't treat people like this forever. Oliver's gaze twitched, revealing a hint of insecurity behind his rigid facade. Take him out, he repeated, voice lower now but still laced with authority. Marcus Wilcox approached first, arms raised in a non-threatening manner. He seemed reluctant, avoiding Chris's eyes. Sir, he murmured, please, let's not make a scene. Chris nodded. He placed his hands in his pockets, showing he posed no threat. As he began to walk, the tension in the air felt thick enough to slice. Patrons watched in utter disbelief, some quietly filming the moment with their phones. One older gentleman shook his head in disappointment, muttering, "This is how you treat people," while a cluster of teenagers recognized Chris from his blockbuster roles and started murmuring protests. Sasha Rivera discreetly zoomed in, capturing every facial expression: Oliver's stiff pride, Chris's solemn calm, Molly's despair, and the crowd's outrage. Sasha felt a dull ache in her chest, witnessing an event that embodied everything she disliked about exclusivity and superficial judgments. Then, just as Chris passed the threshold between the bar area and the main exit corridor, the moment reached its boiling point. A hush fell, so silent one could hear the ocean's rhythmic hum. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Molly Carter again, letting her emotions override her caution. "Stop!" she called, stepping forward quickly. "I can't. I won't stand by and watch this." Tears welled in her eyes. "Mr. Hemsworth has done nothing to deserve this treatment. If the club's going to fire me for speaking up, so be it." Chris spun around, surprise etched on his face, as did half the crowd. Even Oliver Hastings looked taken aback. His mouth parted in astonishment at his junior staff's insubordination. A wave of murmurs rippled through onlookers. Molly inhaled a trembling breath. "You talk about membership rules, but we serve plenty of people who show up with day passes or with last-minute guest confirmations. You just decided to single him out. And for what? Because he didn't walk in waving his celebrity status around." Oliver's face reddened. "Ms. Carter, you're out of line." "I'm out of line," Molly shot back. "What about the basic courtesy we owe every human being who steps foot in here? This is discrimination, plain and simple." At that accusation, Oliver blustered. "How dare you?" But he never finished, because at that moment, the overhead speakers, typically used for club announcements, crackled to life with an accidental, or perhaps faded playback of Sasha Rivera's camera feed. In a strange twist of technology, Sasha's Bluetooth microphone had synced with the club's system. An unintended glitch from her attempts to connect to the venues. "Why?" Everyone froze as the bar area echoed with a snippet of Oliver's earlier remarks, captured crystal clear by Sasha's microphone. "He doesn't belong here. Look at him, wearing a ragged cap and those shorts. No sponsor. Probably just another wannabe surfer type. We don't need that kind of crowd." The words seemed to hang in the salty air. "Chris!" The security guards, Molly Carter, Jason Brooks, and the entire crowd turned their gaze on Oliver Hastings. His own voice looped back, a confession of the shallow prejudice that had fueled his actions. Horror dawned in Oliver's eyes as he realized his private conversation had been broadcast for everyone to hear. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Some staff members shook their heads in dismay. Others looked at the ground, ashamed by association. Sasha Rivera, who was behind the potted palm, stood frozen, uncertain whether to apologize or stay hidden. She had never intended for the audio to go public like this. But perhaps it was the push needed to expose the truth. In that suspended moment, Chris took a slow step toward Oliver. His features were calm, but his eyes shone with an unmistakable hurt. "I hope you understand now," he said in a measured tone. "This is more than a simple policy. It's bias your bias." Oliver opened his mouth, but no words emerged. The entire lounge seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The crisis had peaked, the truth was laid bare for all to see. Oliver Hastings' reasons for refusing service had little to do with membership protocol and everything to do with condescension toward those who didn't match his rigid standards. Finally, Chris turned to the security guards. "Gentlemen, I appreciate you doing your jobs. You can let me go now. I'll leave on my own accord." He met each of their gazes, offering a faint nod of respect. They hesitated, then parted, allowing him to pass. Chris strode past Oliver Hastings without another glance, heading for the gate. The crowd parted like a wave. Cameras whirred, phones beeped, and whispers filled the hush left by Oliver's incriminating audio. Molly Carter stifled a sob and chased after Chris. Sasha lowered her camera, torn between shame and relief. Jason Brooks looked on, fuming on Chris's behalf. In that final moment before Chris stepped beyond the gate, the moral lines clarified under the heavy overcast sky. Prejudice had been outed, dignity had been tested, and the truth, thanks to a hidden camera, was now undeniable. As Chris Hemsworth emerged onto the public beach outside Malibu Shores Beach Club, the reality of what had happened sank in. The sting of Oliver Hastings' words lingered, but Chris inhaled a bracing breath of salty air, letting the ocean breeze provide a measure of solace. Within moments, a small group of sympathetic onlookers followed, eager to express support or simply witness the aftermath of the confrontation. Among them was Molly Carter. She rushed to catch up, tears still wet on her cheeks. "Mr. Hemsworth, Chris, wait, please." He paused, turning to face her. She looked younger in the stark daylight, her fear overshadowed by a determined compassion. "I'm so sorry," Molly said, voice trembling. "This isn't how we're trained to treat guests." Oliver twisted the rules. "I might lose my job, but I couldn't stand there and let it happen." Chris offered a gentle smile, his voice soft. "You showed a lot of courage. People don't always speak up when they see something wrong, especially when their own livelihood is on the line." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I'm grateful." Molly nodded, though her worries still etched faint lines on her brow. I wanted to tell you. I recognized you the moment you walked in." "But Oliver, he's the type who, if you don't arrive in a luxury car or call ahead, he thinks you're beneath him." I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. Chris sighed. "He'll learn one way or another." Then, noticing Molly's anxious gaze, he added, "I'll help if I can. If you face repercussions, let me know. People like Oliver need to be held accountable. Maybe the owners of the club don't realize what's really going on under his watch." Jason Brooks caught up to them, hands stuffed in his pockets. "Chris, I'm sorry, man," he said, voice heavy with guilt. "I wish I could have done more to stop him. I tried to sponsor you, but he had it out for you from the start." Chris offered a faint smile. "You did what you could." More than most would. More behind Jason, Sasha Rivera approached, camera in hand. She appeared a bit disheveled, her face flushed with a mixture of adrenaline and remorse. "Chris," she began hesitantly. "I'm Sasha. I think I was the one who accidentally broadcast Oliver's remarks. My mic connected the club's sound system somehow. I never intended to humiliate anyone in that way." Chris studied her for a moment, registering the sincerity in her eyes. "You helped expose the truth. Maybe it wasn't planned, but it might be the only way Oliver could ever be held accountable." "So thank you." Sasha exhaled, relief washing over her. "I want you to know, I have footage of the entire incident, all of it. I was planning a vlog, but this is bigger than a casual review. I'd like your permission to share what happened, at least in part. People need to see how this place treats folks they assume aren't on their level." Chris considered the idea. A small part of him wanted to leave it behind, to not spark a viral storm on social media, but a stronger voice reminded him that ignoring injustice only allowed it to spread. "All right," he said, giving her a measured nod. "Share it, but keep the focus on the issue, not sensationalism. We should stand against discrimination, not stoke drama for drama's sake." Nearby, a cluster of curious beachgoers watched with expressions of sympathy and frustration. Word had begun to spread quickly, phones were buzzing, and some people were already discussing the fiasco in hushed, outraged tones. Chris scanned the crowd, a wave of conflicting emotions in his chest. He had come here for a quiet respite, only to be shoved back out by prejudice disguised protocol. And yet, the immediate aftermath revealed more than anger or bitterness. Here stood Molly Carter, risking her job to defend him. Jason Brooks, a paying member who tried to do the right thing. Sasha Rivera, an accidental whistleblower who couldn't stand by and let the truth be buried. Their support exemplified the heart of humanity, a willingness to step forward, even when fear whispered to remain silent. Then, as though orchestrated by fate, the clouds overhead finally broke, letting thin rays of sunlight pierce through. The waves glittered along the shore, and the tension that had coiled around everyone's hearts eased just a bit. Chris rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward the imposing gates of Malibu Shores Beach Club. Though he could not see past them now, he imagined Oliver Hastings still reeling from the unintended broadcast of his private remarks. "You know," Chris said quietly, "this isn't just about me. It's about how we treat each other. Malibu, Hollywood, anywhere, we've got to remember that kindness and respect matter more than status or appearances." Molly nodded in fervent agreement. "We need to do better." But Jason put a hand on Chris's shoulder. "Look, I don't know if you still want brunch, but there's a great beachside diner a mile down the shore. It's no 5-star place, but it's got an open door for everyone." Chris's grin returned, small but genuine. "That sounds perfect." With one last glance at the locked gates behind him, he exhaled a deep breath. In that moment, he felt resolve blossom, a determination to trans this debacle into a lesson the world could learn from. A week later, footage of Chris Hemsworth being ejected from Malibu Shores Beach Club had spread across social media like wildfire. Clips captured by onlookers, combined with Sasha Rivera's high-definition recordings, painted a damning portrait of Oliver Hastings' discriminatory behavior. Hashtags like respect over status and Malibu Shores scandal trended for days, igniting conversations about appearance-based prejudice and the entitlement that sometimes festers in luxury settings. At first, the club management tried to do damage control. An official statement attempted to downplay the incident as a misunderstanding of membership protocol. But it was too late. Public opinion rallied behind Chris Hemsworth, and more importantly, behind a broader theme of basic human decency. People from all walks of life, fans, locals, even high-profile Hollywood figures, condemned the elitist behavior and applauded Chris for handling the conflict with composure. In a surprising turn of events, the owners of Malibu Shores Beach Club launched an internal investigation. Rumors swirled that Oliver Hastings had a track record of treating patrons differently based on his snap judgments, dismissing those who didn't exude wealth or celebrity as celebrities in obvious ways. Under public pressure, the club's board of directors suspended Oliver pending further review. They also offered Molly Carter her position back, with a raise and an apology for the hostile work environment she'd endured. Molly, who had spent the week racked with uncertainty over her job, shed tears of relief. Though she remained wary about returning to the same environment, she decided to accept the offer on the condition that the club revamp its policies to ensure no guest would face such blatant discrimination again. Inspired by the wave of support on social media, she saw an opportunity to drive real change from within. Jason Brooks, the local business consultant, helped the board outline fresh membership guidelines. He proposed a more flexible guest pass system and a comprehensive staff training program emphasizing respect and empathy, regardless of outward appearances. He believed that Malibu Shores could salvage its reputation by embracing a more inclusive spirit, turning the scandal into a catalyst for positive transformation. Meanwhile, Chris Hemsworth maintained a measured stance. He refused to vilify every staff member at the club, acknowledging that many, like Molly, were simply doing their jobs under a manager's restrictive rule. However, he did state publicly that Malibu Shores needed to re-evaluate how it welcomed patrons. In an interview on a late-night talk show, Chris underscored that the real story wasn't about fame, but about common human courtesy. "You never know who someone is, or what they've been through," he said, "and a person's dignity shouldn't depend on their clothes or their bank account." But the moral lessons reverberated well beyond Malibu's sandy shores. Social media comments were flooded with personal accounts of everyday discrimination. People turned away from shops, restaurants, or opportunities simply because they didn't look or act the way someone in power expected. In a time when divisions often ran deep, the incident shone a spotlight on empathy and respect as cornerstones of a healthy community. Through it all, Sasha Rivera continued her vlogs, but with renewed purpose. She highlighted stories of kindness in unexpected places and posted follow-ups on the changes happening at Malibu Shores Beach Club. Her subscriber count skyrocketed, fueled not by sensationalism but by her commitment to honest storytelling that championed human decency. In the end, the Malibu Shores scandal had ignited a national conversation about prejudice and the power of individual actions. Though it began with harsh treatment aimed at Chris Hemsworth, it ended with a broader call to action: judge less, welcome more, and never underestimate the transformative power of standing up for what's right. Chris Hemsworth had set out that morning hoping to find a moment of peace by the water. Instead, he found himself at the heart of a cautionary tale that resonates with anyone who's ever felt unwelcome or unjustly judged. And as the hidden camera footage revealed, a single stand for dignity can spark waves of change that reach far beyond a single beach club. Subscribe now. Another inspiring story every evening starting tomorrow. Don't let this message go unnoticed. Share this story if it touched your heart and remind someone you care about. Dignity matters for everyone, from world-famous celebrities to everyday dreamers. Let us know in the comments where you're reading from, and join our community of compassionate souls hungry for real change. Remember, the way we treat one another in life's simple moments often defines who we are. Be that person who stands up when you see wrongdoing, and watch how one act of kindness or courage can echo in unexpected corners of the world.